Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Cup of Joy. I'm your host, Ariana Joy Christie, and I am so glad that you are here. This is a space to inspire, to learn, to grow, and to challenge. Get ready to fill your cup and spread a little joy along the way. Okay, Kayleigh, business and mindset coach and mentor, welcome to Your Cup of Joy.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
Of course. And I'm so excited to have you because I feel like we have so much to chat about. I've met you many times in our community, but we've never actually really sat down and chat. So I'm excited to dive into it with you.
Me too. And it's kind of fun that we're doing that for the first time over a podcast too.
Literally, I know. It's kind of cool because if any of the listeners don't know you either, then we can kind of get to know you all at the same time. So I'm very,
Absolutely.
very excited. Thank you for being open and willing to join. And I thought we could start off by sharing maybe what a mindset coach means
Okay.
to you
Yeah.
and to the world, because I think it's so intriguing. I've been watching your social media and yeah, I'm just so excited to learn about
I love it because I have to explain that to a lot of people.
it.
So to me, my definition of mindset coaching and the work that I do is I help people change their subconscious programming.
Hmm.
So the way I look at it is our mind is set. We have a certain way that we're programmed, a certain kind of like default response or reaction
Mhm.
based on past experiences, beliefs, things like that we're actually usually not aware of because they do live in our subconscious mind. So
Mhm.
what I do with my clients is I help them basically reset their mind. So changing their default setting, and changing their belief system, but like going deep into the subconscious. Like I don't, I always say this, like no surface level isn't deep enough.
Hmm.
Really getting to the root cause of why we are the way we are, why we behave the way we behave, um, why we avoid things, why we react to certain things, why certain things trigger us, like all of those things, and start to go really deep down and figure out why so that we can start to change those. Because unless you have that kind of self awareness of
Mhm.
why we're doing the things that we're doing, then you're able to start changing it. It's hard to change things when you don't really have that awareness because it doesn't stick.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I even find that in my life that years later I'll reflect on something, I'll be like, now that I'm saying it out loud, I think that I was thinking this, or I think the motivation behind it was, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's funny because in the moment you don't realize at all, but I didn't even know that you had the ability to change that. I try to be an aware
Yeah.
person and somebody who really knows what's happening, and you know, it is very difficult to know what is happening subconsciously. So what inspired you to become a mindset coach?
So I hired a mindset coach actually when I was
Ah,
pregnant with my son. I worked with someone who used to coach through Bob Proctor's programs. So Bob
okay.
Proctor, he was like in The Secret. I call him like the OG of personal development. He's
Oh,
passed now. He would have been 90 last week. And
wow.
I'd been, like, dabbling in personal development, like, reading books and, like, going to things and kind of, like, doing all the things that I thought I should do, but, like, nothing was really changing in my life, and I was pregnant with my son, I was working, like, a 9 to 5, there was more month than money, I knew, like, there was something deep inside me that knew I was meant for more. I
Mhm.
didn't really know what that was, so I tried a whole bunch of things very unsuccessfully,
Interesting.
and then I was introduced to this mindset coach, and the way she explained mindset, kind of like I'm explaining it here, is that we are actually programmed. Like we have programming based on our environment and our society, and it really runs like 96 to 98% of our life. And when I started
Hmm.
to reflect back, I do a ton of self reflecting. I realized so many patterns that I was like constantly getting into in all of these different things.
Yeah.
Um, and and then really going like deep down and starting to get to know myself and starting to get to know what I'm passionate about. So um that would have been almost 5 years ago, actually be 5 years in August that I made that investment and hired my first mindset coach. I had my son that October, and then March of 2020 happened, if we can all remember what happened there.
Sure can.
And what really made me realize how powerful what I had learned working with her was, that I was incredibly calm and, like, thriving during COVID with a
Huh.
newborn, Whereas the old me would have been like absolute anxious mess, like just not like I was not good on my own.
Mhm.
I did actually would surround myself with people because I wasn't comfortable with myself. I didn't actually really I didn't know myself very well, and I had a lot of habits that were like self-sabotage, beating myself up, just bringing myself down. And I
Mhm.
started to kind of unconsciously change those habits without really being aware. So during COVID, I was like living my best life, and people were like, "What is going on? What is wrong with you? Like, who are you?" And it was that moment when I realized that I had something really special here with this mindset work.
Totally.
Um, it was a very rocky path to get started. I actually worked on her team for a while. I ended up leaving and working for another coach for about 2.5 years from there, working more in like the business and sales and mindset, which
Mhm.
really got me super passionate to work with entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
And then this January, I decided to like start my own thing just because I have my own way that I know I can impact people.
totally.
But it really just came from changing my life and getting to know myself better and actually like starting to love myself
Ah,
on a deeper level from getting to know myself and understanding myself.
so incredible because what you're saying resonates with me so much. Like, COVID was not a fun time for me. I had the twins, I was in the NICU. It was like I never had been an anxious person in my entire life,
Yeah.
and I was so anxious. And when you talk about, like, surrounding yourself with people, I cannot be alone. Like, I it's so bad, and I'm aware of it, like, I know it.
Yeah.
I I just panic. Like, I'm not well, and I think it is partially that I just, like, lost myself when I became a mom,
Yeah.
and through the pandemic. Like, all of it is multi-layered,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
definitely, but I think that probably resonates with many people because when I have been a little bit open about sharing more about my experience in that, people have really been like, "Oh my gosh, like, me too." And it's when you're going through everyday life and kinda just coasting through, like, my coping mechanism is keeping busy. My schedule is always busy. If I don't have something, I plan something because then I don't have to sit and think about it.
Yeah.
And so I know that's not healthy. I know that's not a good way to be, but when I do talk about it, when I share openly, people are like, "Oh my gosh, me too," or, "Oh, I feel that." And I think that it's so good to start the conversations of saying, like, you can change that and you can be part of the change in that in yourself. So that's very inspiring. And I think so neat that you became this mindset coach because you had experienced it. Sometimes people do something because they're like, oh, I think this is going to be fun. But people say the proof's in the pudding. And I think that's so cool that you were able to really experience it and then share that experience with people.
I think when it comes down to like all the work that I've done, and I've worked with so many, especially like entrepreneurs, and really getting down to their why. Like, why did you decide to take a risk and a leap and go into business for yourself? That's
Yeah,
usually what it comes down to. And there's always like so many layers. It's not the work. It's not um the thing that you do. It's the reason why behind it. Like you had an experience with this that made you want to help more people with that kind of thing. And
totally.
your experience during COVID is more common. Like that was really more common than my experience from all of the people that I've spoken to. And
Hmm.
it's that mindset difference. And because that was me. And it took me a while to even get out of the habit of like my my husband. So he this summer we were very like intentional with like booking. Like I'm starting to say no to things like
Mm,
all of the time.
I need to take note on that.
Yeah. I did not used to say no to things, and he makes a comment because he remembers, like, I think it was a couple summers ago, and it was just, like, I had to every weekend we were doing something, he's like, "Can we just, like, chill? Can we just chill?" And I didn't know how to do that. So, like,
Totally.
what you're saying is, like, yes, I can totally relate because I spent most of my life just, like, filling every single nook and cranny in my calendar so that I didn't have to, like, deal with myself, like, essentially.
Totally. I was actually having a conversation with my uncle yesterday. He had listened to one of the previous podcast episodes, and he was saying it's so funny when you do things physically or like with your hands or like you're out there doing things, there's this like, it's almost like a reward system. Like, oh, the world is going to see me doing things. I'm doing great. I'm busy. But then when it's like the mental load, when you're thinking things in your head and you're planning all of that, that's almost more time consuming and more effort, but there's no reward for that.
Yeah.
And so we never shut down because we want to be doing things. We want to be showing that we're doing things. We want to be feeling like we're doing things, but that might not actually fill our cup or make us feel good or even be healthy, which is wild. It hit me when my son started like really acting out, one of them, when we would be very busy. Like if we had a full weekend, we had a birthday party in the park and then a farmer's market and something else, and we had no time at home, he would be distraught. And I was like, what is wrong with him? Like I started to really, almost feel angry. Like we're doing all these fun things. Like, why aren't you happy? And then we had a day where we were just at home and I've never seen him thrive like that. And it just hit me. Like I was in tears. I was like, how did I not see that all he needed was just time at home and time with us? Like, we put this pressure on ourselves to do the most and to feel so good about, our kids get to experience this and whatever. But all they really want to experience is time with us
Yeah.
in the simplest form. And so I think when you see it through the lens of your kids too, that really like impacted me drastically.
Yeah. Oh, I totally like I can totally relate to that. And one of the biggest things for me too when it was COVID and my son was so my husband's an EMS too. So like he was
Oh,
never home. Like
yeah.
he didn't get a break. So I was like essentially like home with a newborn by myself, loving my life, which was really weird for
Wild.
me. Like so
I'm like,
wild.
what?
And and I started to really like reflect on because this is I would say like probably during COVID, probably about a year into to doing this like deep mindset work, I realized how I'd spent so much of my life being outwardly confident. Like
Mm.
I always like I was the life of the party. I'm now 16 months sober, like, but I was
Amazing.
no, I was the opposite. Like I was the first person to crack open a bottle of whatever. Like
Yeah.
my entire like adolescence into my 20s. I
Mhm.
was drowning a lot of things. This is a whole other podcast episode to go into that.
Yeah,
But I was
understand.
always this outwardly like just really like loud and almost like not obnoxious, but I had to like show up in a certain way with this really really big energy. But when
Mm.
I actually reflect on it, it's because I felt so small inside. So I was like overcompensating for how I felt inside and my actual lack of self-confidence by this like outwardly confident. And then it was draining because it wasn't like the real
Totally.
me. So I
Mhm.
would, I'd go to a party and I'd be the life of the party and then the next day like it was like my hangover was extra worse because I wasn't being me. I was just
Yeah.
giving so much energy that I didn't actually have. So I realized that a big part of that was my lack of self-confidence, and I just started working on building myself up and building up my
Mm.
confidence through like positive affirmations, starting to really change my perception of myself, change the stories that I was telling myself. And
Mm.
like I did this in my early 30s. So
Amazing.
I remember like sitting with my son who was, I don't know, maybe 6 months old at the time and thinking like how can I help him develop that confidence that it's taken me 30 years to like or 33 years at the time to like figure out.
Yeah.
And I actually had an idea and I acted on that idea, which was the first time I ever like acted on an idea very quickly. And I actually started writing a series of positive affirmation books for my kids because I
Oh.
looked and they're out on Amazon now because I was like, there were all the things that I needed to like fix in me that I wanted to fix in my kids. So my first book is You Are Beautiful. And because it took me so long to find that self-love and that confidence,
Yeah.
and then I had such low self-worth. So I have one called You Are Worthy, like
Oh.
helping my kids and other kids. Like it's not just for my kids. I did write them for my kids. And then You Are Capable. Because I spent
Mm.
so much of my life um not feeling worthy and not feeling capable, but I always like wanted to do big things. But because I never felt worthy of it or deserving of it, or like I had always, like, wanted to win things. Like, I was
Mm.
a competitive dancer, and I don't think I ever got, like, a gold medal. I was always, like, 2nd or, like, 3rd, Like, I never got there.
Yeah.
So I had this, like and it actually was, like, picking away at my own image and my own
Oh.
self-confidence, which I
Yeah.
wasn't aware of. So with, like, children, just really like accentuating that need to grow and changing your perspective, like your story. I
Totally.
was like, I need to do something so that my kids, especially like during the pandemic, because I'm like,
Totally.
he can't play with other kids, like we're just home. So how
Mhm.
can I show him that that everyone is beautiful and everyone can be confident, and like starting to bring in those images. So anyway, I think I'm kind of on a rant right now,
I love it.
um,
It's so
but
important.
it's like really looking at all of these things that it took me so long to develop. And I remember my mom saying to me, like when I was telling her about these books, and she's like, I wish I had known that like you were struggling so I
Oh.
could have helped you. And I said, but mom, because of that struggle, now I can make a bigger difference. And
Mm.
it's like changing that perception of your struggle and changing that perception of your challenges, and it's really, really hard to do because it's like because we have for me, I had that pattern of constantly beating myself up and putting
Yeah.
myself down, and to really like to start to change that and be like, "Wait a second, all of those times I beat myself down in my life is now so I can help other people build themselves
Mm.
up." So, like, if I didn't struggle and if I didn't have that, like, the inner and outer, like, conflict, I
Yeah.
wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So it's
How
the same
beautiful
thing,
is
like, with
that?
your seeing, like, your son thrive and being like, because of how you saw that, it's like now you can look at it differently and be like,
Hmm.
"Hey, this is a new perspective." And I think seeing things through our children's eyes, like, it
Totally.
does put things into, like, massive perspective.
It really does. And that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that because affirmations are like a tough one. So I say affirmations with the kids every single night, all three kids. But then when I try to say them to myself, it's almost like, oh, I don't believe it. We want our children to believe it, but like we can't. It's something so simple that, my 1.5-year-old can conceptualize and believe. But us as like older adults, it's sometimes very, very difficult. And then I feel so silly. Like, I'm like, how can I not even, practice this? But I'm telling my kids to. But I think that you're right, that perspective change is so important and is very difficult. It seems like something so simple when we talk about it, it seems simple, but it is an entire like switch in your brain that's already programmed in a certain way.
Well, and that's why it's hard because you're already programmed in a certain way. Like,
Yes.
exactly. So it's for children, they haven't had the time to be programmed. Like,
Yeah, they're a blank slate.
yeah, exactly. So, like,
Mhm.
I share this story. I share this story with my clients all the time, and I'm sure we're gonna talk about this more. But when my son was diagnosed with cancer when he was
Mhm.
2, and we heard that, like, my husband and I, like, we broke, right? Like, we were
Of
just
course.
a complete mess, and our son just, like, looks over at us, in this hospital bed and like, "Why are you crying?" And it was this reminder of it's also he doesn't know what cancer is, like, he doesn't know, I still trying to explain it to him, and it's been 2
Totally.
years,
Mhm.
but it's this powerful reminder that kids haven't been programmed for fear, they haven't been programmed for, um, like, hate, they haven't been programmed for all of these things yet.
Yeah.
So it's like using affirmations with your kids is such a powerful tool because you're actually what you're doing is you're actually programming them and you're actually helping them build those things. So, like, I'm really aware of helping my son not develop fear, even though he's going through this crazy thing that, like, no child should have to go through.
That is
Um,
so
but it's
beautiful.
that reminder that they haven't been around long enough to develop the beliefs,
Yeah.
and some of the beliefs, like, our beliefs are created through the repetition of hearing things over and over, like,
Mhm.
so the stories we tell ourselves, but also just things that are going on in our environment, things that, like, I always like I know my parents did the best that they could do with what they had, and I still had, internal struggles, and
Mhm.
they did do their best, and they wanted nothing but the best for me, and they still do. But it's that awareness of, like, it's through other things. There's just all of these things. So what we can do at home is exactly what you're doing, is just keep doing those affirmations
Yeah.
and keep doing them for yourself too, because
Yeah.
eventually you'll start to believe them. Like,
Yeah.
you can trick your subconscious mind into changing, but
Mhm.
it takes time. And most people, because you feel silly about it, like, you give up before it clicks, right?
Mhm.
There's a story, like, 3 feet from gold. You could be like 3 more days of doing them, but then all of a sudden
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I feel dumb, I'm done. Like,
Ah, yeah.
yeah,
But the repetition for sure is
yeah.
Yeah, something I haven't even considered. Um, so talk to us a little bit about that diagnosis if you can.
Absolutely.
Um, I know when I talked to you and when I learned about your son, I just like my heart broke for you. And having it was like a 2-minute conversation that we had a few weeks back, and I left feeling so inspired. I went to my husband and I was like I, have a tough day or like something breaks or I don't know, like little tiny things that I worry about. And your entire mindset just inspired me so, so, so much. So, can you share a little bit more about your son's diagnosis, how old he was, how that happened, and how that really has played a role in your life?
Absolutely. So it was August 16th, 2022. The day I will never forget,
Mhm.
was the day that we found out that he has high risk leukemia. So, the day before that, we actually brought him into he went to daycare that morning. Like, didn't have a ton of
All of it.
urgency.
Mhm.
The symptom that he was presenting was he was looking a little bit jaundiced. We were at a family function, and my family's like, "His coloration's off. You might wanna go take him in for blood work."
Hmm.
So, he had also been having, like, really weird bruising, but he's 2, so, kids like, my 2-year-old has bruises all the time, and
All the
I
time.
start to go down the I was like, "No, no, no, I literally just saw her fall off the couch." Like, it's you know what I mean?
Yes.
So we took him into the emerge, and they did, blood work, and then they actually transferred him right to McMaster.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that was they transferred him to Maxter, I think it was like 11 p.m. on that Monday night. And I was at home with our daughter because she was 6 months old at the time. So
Mhm.
my parents came in and I went like right down to see. We didn't find out what he had right away. At Guelph, they can't diagnose, but they said it looks like he has severe anemia because his blood levels were
Oh,
so like out of whack.
yeah.
A regular healthy hemoglobin is for children is like I don't really know what it is because he's never had it, but it's over 100 and his was 30.
Oh my gosh.
Um, Anytime, which hasn't happened in a really long time, it drops below 70, he needs a blood transfusion. So
Oh,
he sits around 90 to 100 right now, give or take. So just that's just kind of put it into perspective of how that was. And
yeah.
even like these words, I didn't know what hemoglobin was before his cancer diagnosis. So
Totally.
the next day we actually found out that he had leukemia, and a couple days later we found out that it was a higher risk version with a genetic mutation. So a couple
Oh,
days later he had a surgery to get his port put in, which is where he gets accessed in his chemotherapy, and it just kind of it goes like right into his heart essentially and then pumps out like
hmm.
it's pretty intense. So I would say like we spent the first 2 weeks between Mac and Ronald McDonald House with our daughter, who learned how to crawl there, which was like, can you wait till we get home, please?
Oh, yeah.
And it was I think the first week was just I describe it as it's like I got run over by a transport truck, and then like while I was down, it's like slowly backed over me again. That's how I felt.
Mhm.
And I felt that way for a while because it was, it's like, what do we do, right? The fear sets in, all of those things set in, and I really looked at. I think it was like the first or second day we were there, and I was like, started to think about all of the things to be grateful for,
Oh,
and like being at McMaster and having this amazing care and people who came in and like they were really like they explained things to us, and they gave us hope. Like leukemia it has an 80 to 90% success rate of
hmm.
for kids.
Did not
His
know
high
that.
risk made that a little bit lower, but then he's just on extra chemo for that. So it's like all of these things. It's like, so I started to find the gratitude in all of these moments. The support that we had, like our family, people looking after our dogs, like the things that you forget of. I had friends watering our gardens, like,
Mhm.
offering to go over. And the big mindset shift, I think, for me was when I realized that I not once, yes, I had fear and I had, anxiety and all of those things, but I didn't have anger. And I
Hmm.
looked at that and I was like, that's really interesting because I think a lot
Very.
of people would be really angry that, okay, why is this happening to me? Right. Like that's what you hear so often. And I really looked at it as all of the work I've been doing. I've been doing this inner work for like 3 years at this point, and what it helped me was shift my perception of when bad things happen
Hmm.
because like life's always happening, but when you change that perception and you start to say, "Okay, well, this isn't happening to me, it's happening for me."
Oh,
So I started to think about, "Okay, this has to make us stronger. This has to make our relationships better. This has to do all of these things."
hmm,
Now, they all broke before they got stronger
of
during the
course.
first couple months, but that is what happened, and I just think about that perception shift alone in those moments, that really kind of paved the way for how the next well, we're now 23 months into this journey, and we
Wow.
only have 2 months left, so we're getting there, but it's really been, um, incredibly challenging, like, I have lots of breakdowns, and
Of
I
course.
try to show those too because I think it's important. I am human, right? Like, I am
Yeah.
human, I'm a mother,
Yeah.
but it's also I look at how much, I've grown, how much my husband's grown,
Hmm.
how my son is so brave and confident, and, like, he um goes into all of these things with, like, such grace and patience, and that's not the norm for four-year-olds, like,
Not at
constantly
all.
getting poked and prodded, so I'm always getting these compliments on how
Oh,
he shows up and how, like, they love him as a patient, and I think about all of the work that I've done on myself and how I see that coming out in him at his young age, going through something that, like, most people will never go through in their life as a
mhm.
young kid, and just that reminder and his resilience, like, reminds me that I'm also resilient
Mm.
and that I can show up and push. And I mean, professionally, I've grown so much in the past 2 years, even, like, launching my own business while still going through this, having another like,
Totally.
I still have another daughter at home who's 2, and she's very
Yeah.
spirited. But it's just looking at those, like, all of those the lessons that came from those challenges
Mhm.
really, I think, helped shape me as a mom and as a woman and also as a coach.
Totally. I think it's so inspiring what you're saying because one of the things that I just really impacted me, I guess, is a lot of times I think we hear almost this like toxic positivity, like, "Oh, it's okay. Like this is going to be fine." And you can almost sense someone still like really struggling and not acknowledging that struggle. And I think what you're doing here is holding space for those awful, terrible, sad moments, the negative feelings that you feel, and having a space to know that those feelings are valid. You can feel upset. You can feel angry for a bit. Like you can feel all of those things no matter what is happening in your life. But then having that mindset shift to say, okay, like I held space for those emotions. It's okay to feel that way. This is not ideal. But how can we create strength in our family through this? How can we teach our children that you can overcome struggles and that your mindset is everything. And I think that's so beautiful, and it's not saying, it's okay, everything's going to be fine. It's really changing that mindset, and I think that's so important and so beautiful.
Thank
The
you.
other thing is that I saw a reel maybe even this morning on Instagram of parents having a conversation with their kids. And it was just saying, we model the behavior, like the way that we speak to each other models the behavior that of the way that our children will speak to each other, and then models the behavior that our children will accept the way to be treated when they get older.
Yeah.
And so, like, even way far down the line, that impacts our lives and it impacts our children's lives so drastically. So, I think you doing all of that inner work and showcasing and modeling to your children the mindset change and the mindset shift has proven, like hearing how incredible your son is doing and how the nurses love to have him as a patient, like that mindset only comes from you modeling that behavior for him. And I think that is so beautiful and such a good thing to remember as parents or as people who have, children in our lives in some sense. It's like we model the behavior that they are going to have. And so I just think that's so incredible.
Yeah,
Thank you for
thank
sharing
you.
that with us.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting because I really look at it's like what we don't really fix in ourselves, we pass on to our children.
Mm,
And, I don't know if you ever
yes.
heard this growing up, it's like, "Don't do as I say, not as I do." Like, but it's not that. It's like, no, it's do you
The opposite.
say what you do? Like, it's that integrity, right? Having that
Mhm.
integrity, and how
Yeah.
you show up, because your kids are gonna grab onto that, and, like, I still like, I'm not perfect, I have a 2 and a 4-year-old, like, you don't think they push my buttons and I, like, lose my mind every once in a while?
Yeah.
And every time I do, I catch myself and I'm like, "Okay," I, like, come back and I, like, kind of apologize. I'm like, "Sorry, mommy lost it," like,
Yeah.
but this is why, and this is how we can all do better as a family. Now they look at me like I'm crazy because 'cause they're
Of course.
toddlers, but
Yeah.
I think even just continuing to show up, that helps me become aware of how I wanna be and show up for them.
Mhm.
Like, though I love the work I do. I love working with, like, my clients. I'm so it's actually it's funny because it's actually, like, my self-care. It's, like, working,
Aw.
which is,
Yeah.
um, crazy and amazing. But I really look at it, it's like, "Okay, why do I do the work and why do I keep pushing myself?" It's to
Mhm.
show my kids. Like, yes, helping other people and making a difference, like, yeah, that's all great, but it's to show them. It's
Mhm.
to like, have them model after what I'm doing, and
Yeah.
I'm not perfect, and I don't know what perfect is, but I'm always gonna be striving, and I say I'm always gonna be striving to get 1% better every day because it's
Oh.
not this huge thing. We can't change everything at once, but if you just focus on, like, 1 or 2 things at a time,
Mhm.
your life will look so different in a very short period of time.
It's so, so true. Um, so when I was in the NICU with the twins, I gave birth really early. It was we just there were so many unknowns. We didn't know what was happening. It was pandemic, so no supports in person or anything like that. And I totally just lost myself. Like I didn't know who I was as a human being. My entire belief system felt like it was breaking. I didn't understand. I was just lost.
Yeah.
And so I was in a very dark place, not well at all. And I just have been reflecting on that since my conversation with you of like your experience and the way that you've worked through it is so tremendous and beautiful and inspirational. Um, you talked a little bit about how that's impacted your business as a mindset coach, but can you chat a little bit more about the influence that that has had on you? What kind of skills or things you've learned through that that you now put into your business and teach your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think vulnerability is a superpower.
Mm,
So I'm always like I'm sharing my truth with my clients. Like I share the good, the bad, and the ugly.
mhm,
I talk a lot about would have been actually last May, June, that like I had kind of lost myself and my priorities were completely out of whack because I was going through this such a challenging time,
mhm.
but it was also old programming coming up and avoidance.
Oh,
I used to suppress things a lot. So when you were talking about like how giving space to like let out those emotions, that's what we should be doing because we're so. I remember like people asking me, "Oh, you're so strong." It's like I'm strong because I allow myself to be weak and, like,
mm,
being able to lean into that. So,
I love that.
I broke, like, really, like, my relationships weren't doing well. My priorities were completely out of whack. Like, I was traveling a lot for the job I was doing too, um, which I don't regret any of those because it was nice going away and having, like, a couple nights of sleep in a bed, but
Totally.
it wasn't the right time to do it.
Mm,
And I was just kind of putting my family not where they needed to be, and I became aware of this, and it broke me, and I've had, like, very, challenging conversations about it, and I pulled the thread back, like, did a lot of self-reflecting, "Okay, where does this come from?" And
mhm.
then realizing that I hadn't actually properly processed what we had been going through for the past it would have been, like, 10 months at the time.
Yeah.
So I started actually, like, digging deeper into my own, into my own subconscious,
Mhm.
and I had help of, like, a coach and a therapist, and going into there and really starting to actually process what had happened. And what happened from there was actually so beautiful because I learned how to shift my priorities very quickly and put my family first. And I started working a lot less. I started being more mindful of what I was saying yes and no to.
Mm.
My mentor, actually, at the time, who I was also working for, told me to stop working Fridays. He's like, I don't want you to work Fridays anymore. Like, take Fridays off. Like, what boss says that?
Yeah,
Um,
truthfully.
because he understands how when you do start to prioritize the things that are important to you, um, your results actually change. So I started working less and started to really spend more time with my son, and my results shifted. I started getting new clients, and I was showing up in a different way because I was leaning into the the lessons that I learned from that experience and sharing those with my clients. And like I've cried on client calls before. Like I have, because I think it's important for people to see that. And I think that's
Totally.
what really inspires people. So through all of those lessons, I became a better coach, and I started to attract more people. And my income went up. I worked a lot less, and it was really this awareness that when you start to prioritize your values,
Mm,
even though that's not how we're trained. We're not trained to do that. We're
not at
trained to
all.
work really, really hard to get what we want. But when you start to prioritize your values, learn how to actually focus, because that's a
Mhm.
big thing, right? We're so distracted all the time. So
So
learn how to focus,
distracted.
be intentional with our time. Like you can actually achieve more in less time. So I talk a lot about that, and it takes self-discipline, and
Totally.
that's a really hard thing for so many people. So I do a lot of work with like, okay, well, what are your values? Like, why are you doing what you're doing? And how can you schedule those values into your calendar instead of, I became an entrepreneur because I don't want to work around my family. I wanted to family around my work.
Ah, I love
And
that.
I actually started leaning into that. So it was really about like learning how to focus and learning how to be more disciplined.
Mm.
And the way I did that is just through doing it over and over and over, not just thinking about it, but like doing it, being like, okay, put your phone away, put your do not disturb on, like set a timer and work on this and don't leave it until you are done, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
And just like I had to do it over and over and over again until I actually became more efficient, right? Like
totally.
I'm a recovering multitasker over here. So,
Story of my life. I'm not
right?
recovering though.
But I think like through my challenges and through showcasing like as an entrepreneur what you can achieve when you're going through challenges. Like
Mhm.
I did a post. I'm working with a business coach right now. And she's like, okay, let's like shift your messaging, right? And so I've been a commission salesperson for until January, working on commission and selling other people's programs and coaching through them. So like I know what I've earned. And she's like, but have you ever thought about like what you've sold? So I did the
Sure.
math and I sold for someone else $1.37 million between 2022 and 2023.
Amazing.
But 2022, I had a baby in February, and
Oh my
at the
gosh.
end of 2022, my son got diagnosed with
I
cancer.
didn't even think about the timing of
Right?
that.
Yeah. So I like she's like, "Lean into that more because that's inspirational AF." Like,
Totally.
because I learned how to do it in a certain way because of the mindset work and because of the
Mm.
shifts and like learning how to actually be confident and not like I don't like fake it till you make it. I like be it until you are it. Just keep showing up,
Huh.
getting uncomfortable, pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. Like
Mhm.
your comfort zone is just a room filled with your favorite excuses. So you open
Totally.
the door and you just start to walk out and you don't let them pull you back in. And
Mm.
like I just do it over and over and over again. Like I actually don't really know what makes me uncomfortable anymore. I have to start thinking about that because
I
I've just
love
grown it so
that.
big. But it's through doing it and through showing up. And my biggest thing is my purpose and my why and my goals are so deep that they inspire me so much that they allowed me to push through the challenges, and I kept going because it would have been a really easy to just say, "Screw it, I'm gonna go get a real job," and,
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Totally, for sure.
Yeah,
But I think that's so incredible that again, it's mindset and it's value based. Like I keep going this is like my year of value based approaches to everything. Like if it doesn't align with my values, I don't want to do it.
yeah,
And that was something that was hard for I was like, what are my values? I don't know. Like cuz I wasn't self-reflecting. I wasn't understanding who I was. I shared that I totally lost myself. And so as I was kind of rebuilding, I was thinking like who am I? Like, what drives me? What are my values? And it's incredible when you switch that mindset and you really think about your values and you make value based decisions and you take this value based approach, how much things can change and how much better you can feel because you're doing things that align with who you are and what you fundamentally believe.
yeah.
And it's incredible, but like you said, like, it does take work and it's a different mindset to have, but I love when you talk about values and making those decisions based on values, it is so, so important,
I think we've really been programmed to, put our values last.
truthfully.
Like, if you think of society, like,
Yep.
putting our values last or even We're not taught how to know ourselves, and this is a
No.
really, really, like, big one. I have, like, a program that I take people through, and my second lesson in that is all just self-reflection questions, like,
Mm.
"Who are you?" Because you go to say, like, "Who are you?" It's like, "Okay, well, I'm Kayleigh." No, "Who are you?" I'm a mom, I'm a woman, like, those are all like, yeah, sure, those are all words, but
Yeah.
who are you? Like, what makes you tick? What are your values? What gets you to jump out of bed in the morning? What
Mhm.
lights you up? What energizes you? What drains your energy? Like, to actually sit down and figure those things out. So I do that all the time. I'm like, I self-reflect on, okay, what's energizing me, what's draining me. And I also understand that there's seasons for everything. So
True.
starting to understand how to lean into those seasons is really,
Mhm.
really big too, because we often try to resist the season that we're in.
Mhm.
So through self-reflection, through figuring out, what's lighting me up right now, and what's getting me going, what's, getting me out of bed in the morning when the kids are up a million times at night, because that still
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
What's driving me to do the work that I'm doing and to keep connecting back to that,
Mm.
um, is so, so, so important. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I've just kept going.
Mm. That's beautiful. And what is funny to me is that as an adult, it's uncomfortable to self-reflect. It's uncomfortable for someone to ask, "Well, what do you do for fun?" "I don't know. Parent."
Yeah.
"What are your hobbies?" "Do I
Fair.
have any?" "Watching reality TV so I can pause my brain." Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I've had that happen a few times where I'm like, "What do I do for fun?" It's so funny how uncomfortable that can make us. Whereas, like, when we're a kid, we know, like, "Oh, these are the activities I do. I play soccer, or I play guitar, or I take music lessons." Like, because you're in activities and those are the things that you get excited for and fuel you, it's so much easier to answer those questions. And then when you get older and you have society's pressures of keeping busy and doing things and never taking a break, like, you lose the things that fuel you. And
Mhm.
so then you're asked about them and you're like, "Oh my god, I don't know."
Yeah.
So it's funny to me how it does make you uncomfortable, but like you said earlier, like, being uncomfortable is good. Good things come from that, and pushing yourself outside of that comfort zone, I think, is where your whole life can begin even, especially when working through a transformation like that. I just think that's so incredible.
Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about supports and putting supports in place, because as an entrepreneur, as someone who's running a business, as a parent, and as a parent of a child who has extra needs like you do, that's a lot.
Mhm.
That's a lot to take on as an individual human being. You're responsible for many, many, many other lives, not just including your children, but also all of your clients. And so I'm a huge advocate for support and putting the correct supports in place, but it can be difficult. Like, it's not an easy thing to do, especially if you're struggling mentally or you feel like you've maybe run out of capacity. And, like, I sometimes joke, like, my whole life, my whole job is scheduling. Like, I'm scheduling, like, who's going to be there for this and what
Yeah.
support do I have here? It's very difficult.
Yeah.
But what role has a support system played in your journey, and how can other people really build that strong support system for themselves?
Oh, I love this question because it's played every role. Like,
Mm.
I have had to learn how to ask for help because I think especially as
Difficult.
women have a hard time asking for help because we
Yep.
just want to do it all. Like, it's like this idea of wearing busy as a badge of honor, right? And I
Literally.
I used to do it all the time.
Yep.
Um So I'm okay, like, I ask for help all the time.
Mhm.
Sometimes maybe I ask for help too much. I took your kids last weekend, like, you can deal with them right now. But a big part of it was, so as an entrepreneur, my husband took paternity leave. So
Love.
when Zoe was born, he was off work for, I think he got like 8 months. So
Amazing.
when Ethan got sick, which also was like, old school relatives, like, "He's taking time off?" It's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah," and it's amazing, and it was so cool to watch my husband, like, really step into that role,
Mhm.
just made me love him even more, right? Um, but when Ethan got sick, he was, as EMS, he was able to, like, switch to, like, a stress leave.
Oh, cool.
So he was home until just October of last year,
Wow.
either doing some sort of, like, form auditing at work, so which was essentially him and, like, the pregnant paramedics who were, like, about to pop, who couldn't be on the road. And so I had him here, which is a huge like, I don't know how I could have done any of what I did without having that kind of level of support at home.
Totally.
As soon as we were comfortable putting Zoe in daycare, we did. We did wait a little bit longer just because Ethan was so immunocompromised.
Mhm.
But also just having, one less kid around was very helpful.
Very. Yeah.
And, like, we're very fortunate. We're both from here. So, like, my parents live 15 minutes up the road.
So
My
nice.
parents live in Eris, and my husband's parents live in Rockwood. So,
Oh,
like,
so nice.
they're right here.
Mhm.
Um, and they just wanna help. Like, we're very fortunate to have family who want to be so involved, with our kids. So I've really leaned into that and learned how to let go of the guilt of having other people around and having other people help out, and, um, I also like when I ask for help, I always say, like, "It's okay if you can't, just tell me no." Like,
Yes.
everything's figure outable. Like, I don't
Just
have
throwing
to
it out
do
there.
all of the things.
Mhm.
Um, so it's just leaning into that, but I think the biggest thing is, like, letting go of any guilt. I
So hard.
One of the things as a mom, like, I think one of the biggest things was, like, learning how to just not feel guilty about anything.
Yeah.
Um, which was really big, but it kind of, like, went the wrong way, when I talk about the kind of the break last year,
Yeah.
where I was like I had removed so much guilt, but I was, like, doing my priorities were out of whack, and I didn't feel guilty about it.
Mm.
So, that was interesting, but learning how to remove, like, the mom guilt of, um because I changed the story about what I was doing. It's like, "No,
Yeah.
like, you look how many people love you, who wanna support you, like, isn't
Yes.
that cool?"
Mhm.
Um, and wanna see us, like, get through all of this and helping us
Totally.
out. So, it's just a lot of changing the stories we're telling ourselves about asking for support and being
Yes.
okay with it. Like, if you can, like, hire help, like, get someone to clean your house, like, I don't
Yeah.
do it anymore. I don't remember the
Yeah.
last time I used my own vacuum, like and that's okay, right? I had to
Yeah.
release guilt about that too. I had to
Yeah.
release stories about that being like a work from home mom and you don't even clean your own house, like, you
Well,
know?
invest in yourself, yeah, and
Yeah,
so that you can be doing the things that you love and that you are good at, because our time is limited, like, you only have a certain amount of hours in a day, but my girlfriend Marissa, said to me a few months back, and it sticks with me all the time, "There is no award for going it on your own. You
yeah,
don't get a trophy at the end for, 'Yay, Ariana, you did it by yourself.' That's not a thing.
yeah,
So you don't have to do it by yourself." And I think about that every single time. I'm like, doing 100 things at once, and I'm, like, losing it, like, not well, not okay, and then I'm like, "Oh, I could just call somebody and ask for some help."
yeah. Or, like,
And
certain things just don't need to get done right now.
yes,
Right? That's
like, "Okay,
another
my
big
house is
one.
messy." Mhm.
Yeah,
Totally. Oh, I
yeah,
love that. I also just love your mindset. When I was thinking about this conversation with you and thinking about, what mindset coaching is and changing that perspective, um I thought about this experience that I had when I was in university. So I did a volunteer trip in Kenya in university, and we were living in this community with a group of women who had all been through really awful things. And one of the women was telling us her story, her journey, the things that she had been through, and she primarily spoke Swahili. So she was telling us the story in her language. We had a translator there. And at the end of her story, like, we're all in tears. It's so, so very tragic. And she looked up and she said in English, "But every day I thank God because in every mess, there's a message." And this quote has just stuck with me
yeah,
forever because it was this mindset shift that I couldn't even, just hearing her story, I couldn't believe having that mindset. I had never even felt that way in my life, and I hadn't experienced anything as tragic as this. And it's always just stuck with me because it's just such a good way to think, like, something beautiful can come out of something terrible. And
mhm.
it's how you look at it and it's how you go about it. Um, and it's just so impactful. So my question for you is, what are some of the most significant lessons that you've learned through this experience and especially through the diagnosis of your son?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is it's okay to not be okay. Like,
Mm.
allow yourself to not be okay. Like,
Yeah.
we had to take my son to the hospital because anytime he spikes a fever, we have to take him to Mac, like, right away. And a couple weeks ago, oh, I took him 3 times that week, and then finally we were
Oh.
admitted for 5 days. And so he had a fever, and I just, like, went to the kitchen and I started to cry, and my husband came over, he's like, "Oh, everything's gonna be okay." He's like, "Yeah, I know. I need just let me, like, I just gotta cry. I just have to have my breakdown right now."
Mhm.
And it was just knowing that I need to have those spaces and those times. So really realizing that it's okay to not be okay, but also understanding that it's a choice to stay there. And that
Mm.
was for me the biggest thing. So I was speaking to someone not that long ago, and she was like, "Well, you know, what about like when you go down the rabbit hole?" And I was like, "Well, the nice thing is because of my self-awareness, I start to go down the rabbit hole and then I catch myself and I climb back up." I used to live at
Mm.
the bottom of the rabbit hole. I had a tent down there, like that's where I hung out
Yeah.
most of my life, but it's in that perception shift of just being able to catch that, like, and you know when you're starting to feel bad. You know
Yeah.
when things are, you know when you need space and time to have that breakdown, and
Yeah.
instead of resisting it, just, like, lean into it and let yourself have those moments of weakness, because
Mhm.
I get complimented all the time on my strength, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm strong because I allow myself to be weak. If I didn't allow myself to be weak, I would be fake strong just like I used to be fake confident."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, totally. And holding space for that is so, so important. And I love that you're putting that message out there too, because I think sometimes we don't feel like allowed to do that. Like, oh, I'm not allowed to be sad or I'm not allowed to feel that way. And so holding space for that is so, so important.
Mhm.
I love that.
The other one is gratitude. Like,
Yes.
in every moment, just look for the things to be grateful for. Like, there are glimmers everywhere of things to be grateful
Oh,
for. I've spoken to, like, so many people who are like, "I don't know what to be grateful for," and I'm like, "Did you wake up this morning? Like, do you have running water? Do you have," like,
mm,
I don't wanna compare, but in North America or, any kind of, like, first world country, we have so much to be grateful
so
for
much. Hmm.
that other places don't have, just like the story you just told, right?
Yes,
So,
totally.
switching to gratitude in hard moments is so, so, so key. So, like, I did that really quickly when we were in the hospital and just started to
Oh,
look at all of the things to be grateful for. And that change, like, it just changes your energy too, right?
that's incredible and such a good lesson to think of, even in everyday, like little tiny crappy situations, you know? It's sometimes hard, but I think if you can have that in your mindset, that's incredible. Um, one more thing is that this podcast is called Your Cup of Joy, and the whole premise of it is to inspire people to practice self care and to know that, similar to what we've talked about today, if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't show up as the best version of yourself in any aspect of your life, whether it's business, whether it's being a wife or a partner or a friend or a parent or anything. Like, we are not the best versions of ourselves if we're not filling our cup first. And so, my question for you is, what is your favorite way to practice self care and how do you fit that into your schedule?
I love that question, and I think it brings back to, like, figuring out, for people who are listening, actually figuring out what self-care is to you. It's not
Yes.
like, sometimes I do like to take a bubble bath, and sometimes but that's not self-care to me. For me, it's like I love starting my day and ending my day with routines, and I do, like, a gratitude practice, and I journal a lot, and
Love.
self-reflection. I think those are my biggest self-care routines that I do now, and I do those daily, and they don't take a lot of time, so I can fit them
Incredible.
in.
Yeah.
Meditation has been a really big one that's been really hard for me to
So hard.
yeah, but to start to really, embracing a meditation practice, like, those things, even if it's just 5 to 10 minutes in the morning and 5 to 10 minutes at night, which is usually ends up being longer, but mornings are harder depending on when the
Agreed.
kids wake
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Adding those things in just can really help reset me. I never say no to a day at the spa, but
Hey.
like, getting out of my house and
Mhm.
changing the environment, like, some days I'll go work from a coffee
Yes.
shop because I just work from home.
Mhm.
Those things, I think those are self-care too, right? I think it's just whatever, again, it comes back to, like, what's energizing you right now, what's making you feel good right now, and it doesn't have to be this, like, it doesn't have to be a spa day. I do like to plan those, but sometimes it can be like, I'm just gonna go for a walk and not listen to anything, or
Yes.
I'm just gonna go, drink a cup of tea in peace when my
Mhm.
children are asleep, or whatever that can be. It's like every day it looks different.
Mhm.
So being self-aware enough to ask, like, what do I need right now? And what
Yeah,
can I take time for right now? And just getting into the habit of doing that every single day. So
I love that.
journaling, meditating, being alone and being in quiet, which is something that was not my old self-care.
Yeah, it can make you feel
Those
uncomfortable sometimes, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, those are the things I love to do, and they fill me up.
Amazing. Yeah, I think it just totally goes back to what makes you feel good. And I think the important thing for people to remember too is that it doesn't have to take time. Like it's not like you're not committing a full day or a half of a day. Like that is beautiful when you have the time and capacity to do that. But on the daily, like you can go and make your hot cup of coffee and drink it in a place that you love. Or you can just take 5 minutes to write something down, like you said. Like it can be little things. We sometimes think so big and grand and we don't have time for it, but there are little tiny pieces of your day that you can really make for you and it has impact.
Those little things in the smaller pockets of time have more impact to me than the big
Totally.
ones. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So to end, Kaylee, I'm going to give you some rapid fire questions if that is
Awesome.
okay. Coffee or tea?
I switch. Right now I'm a tea.
Oh,
Right now I'm on tea or iced coffee.
oh, love.
Yeah.
So good. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Me too. One thing you can't live without.
My journals.
I love that. You're inspiring me.
I literally have 3 journals right beside me right
It's incredible. Good for
now.
you.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. Dream travel destination.
Ooh, I've done a ton of traveling when I was younger,
Amazing.
and I my dream trip is just to be able to take my family to the places. I've been all over Europe, some of the states. I just wanna have those experiences with my kids. We
So
actually,
beautiful.
are in the middle of planning a wish trip with Ethan.
Get
So,
out of here.
yeah, so I don't know, we're probably gonna go to the Caribbean to, like, a
Oh,
just kids-friendly resort,
yeah.
but yeah, I think, like, for me, it's just do going anywhere with my kids and my husband and having them experience things. So there's, like, no one place, it's just all of the places.
That's so incredible. I love that. Well, I can't wait to hear about how the trip goes.
Yeah,
And can you share with us, Kaylee, where people can find you and where they can connect with you?
absolutely. The best place is Instagram. Like, I'm on all the socials, but I think I'm the most active on Instagram, so you can connect with me at the Kayleigh Kennedy.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing us and for trusting us with your story. And thank you for inspiring people and giving a bunch of those little nuggets that hopefully they can take home with them to switch their mindset and have an amazing life.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.